Three black SUVs pulled up outside a rundown apartment building at dawn. Men in $1,000 suits stepped out, scanning the street like Secret Service agents. Victoria Hale froze mid-step, coffee cup trembling in her hand as she watched them knock on a door she knew too well. The apartment where Ethan Cole, the struggling single father she'd fallen in love with, lived with his 6-year-old daughter. The door opened. Ethan emerged wearing a tailored charcoal coat she'd never seen before, his entire demeanor transformed. One of the suited men spoke. "Sir, the board is waiting." Victoria's world shattered. The man she loved was a lie, just like her. If you want to see how this twisted love story ends, stick around until the final word. And hey, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, let's dive in. The headline hit Bloomberg at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Tech prodigy Victoria Hale vanishes, billion-dollar company in chaos. By 7:15, her phone had logged 237 missed calls. By 8, she'd thrown that phone into the Chicago River. Victoria sat in the back of a Greyhound bus headed nowhere particular, wearing a $15 hoodie from Target and jeans that actually fit wrong. Her hair, normally blown out to perfection by a stylist who charged $300 an hour, was pulled into a messy ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry except a cheap watch she'd grabbed at a gas station. She looked at her reflection in the dark window and barely recognized herself. 30 years old, youngest female CEO on the Fortune 500 list. Net worth estimated somewhere north of $2.3 billion, though the exact number shifted depending on which tech blog you believed. And absolutely, completely alone. The woman in the seat across from her was eating McDonald's. The smell made Victoria's stomach turn, not because it was unpleasant, but because she realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten anything that didn't come on a white tablecloth. The woman caught her staring. "You want a fry, honey?" Victoria shook her head, then surprised herself. "Actually, yeah. Thank you." The fry tasted like salt and grease and something she couldn't name. Normal. It tasted normal. "Where you headed?" the woman asked. "I don't know yet." The woman laughed, like that was the sanest thing she'd heard all day. "Me neither. Isn't that something?" Victoria almost smiled. Almost. The bus rolled through the industrial outskirts of the city, past warehouses and storage facilities and neighborhoods she'd only ever seen from highway overpasses. Her entire life had been conference rooms and corner offices and charity galas where people paid $10,000 a plate to eat food they wouldn't finish. She'd given keynote speeches at Stanford, been profiled in Vanity Fair, had coffee with senators and dinner with venture capitalists who spoke in euphemisms about disruption and market domination. And through it all, she'd been utterly, crushingly lonely. The breaking point had come 6 days ago. His name was Marcus Greenfield, and she'd actually thought he might be different. He was a designer, not a tech bro. He read books. He'd seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts about things that had nothing to do with quarterly earnings or stock prices. They'd been dating for 4 months when she'd walked into her office and found him pitching her CFO on a proposal to acquire his struggling design firm. He'd used her, not even cleverly, just straightforward transactional exploitation dressed up in dinner dates and weekend trips to Napa. When she'd confronted him, he hadn't even looked ashamed. "Come on, Victoria. What did you think this was? You're not exactly girlfriend material. You're a portfolio opportunity." She'd fired her CFO that afternoon for entertaining the pitch. She'd had her lawyer send Marcus a cease and desist. And then she'd sat in her penthouse, 47th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake, and realized she couldn't name a single person in her life who loved her for anything other than what she could do for them. Not one. Her parents had stopped calling unless they needed money for one of their causes. Her college friends had drifted away years ago, intimidated or resentful or just unable to relate. The people she worked with respected her, feared her even, but none of them actually knew her. She'd built an empire, and the foundation was completely hollow, so she'd walked away. Her assistant thought she was taking a mental health week at a private resort in Arizona. Her board thought she was pursuing a confidential acquisition. Her publicist thought she was at an undisclosed location working on her memoir. Victoria had gotten very good at managing information, at controlling narratives. She'd bought herself maybe 2 weeks before the whole thing collapsed into crisis. 2 weeks to find out if anyone could ever just like her. The bus stopped in a city called Millbrook, 3 hours northwest of Chicago. Population 47,000, according to the sign. Victoria got off because the next stop was another 4 hours, and she was tired of sitting. She stood on the curb with a small backpack containing 2 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, and $11,000 in cash she'd withdrawn in increments small enough not to trigger any alerts. The air smelled like snow and car exhaust. A diner across the street advertised breakfast all day. She walked in and ordered coffee. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and comfortable shoes, poured the coffee and said, "You look lost, sweetheart." "I am," Victoria admitted. "Do you know anywhere that's hiring?" The woman studied her for a long moment. "You running from something?" "Yeah." "Something illegal?" "No, just complicated." The waitress nodded like she'd heard that story before. "Coffee shop 2 blocks down has a help wanted sign. Owner's decent. Pays crap, but she won't ask too many questions." "Thank you. What's your name?" Victoria hesitated. "Tori." "Well, Tori, welcome to Millbrook. It's boring as hell, but at least it's honest." The coffee shop was called Ember and Brew, and it was exactly the kind of place Victoria would have never noticed in her previous life. Small, mismatched furniture, local art on the walls that was more enthusiastic than talented, a chalkboard menu that listed drinks with names like The Usual and Chloe's Special Hot Chocolate. The owner was a woman named Diane, probably mid-40s with curly gray hair and paint stains on her jeans. "You ever worked coffee before?" Diane asked. "No," Victoria said honestly, "but I'm a fast learner." "You make a good latte." "I can learn." Diane looked at her the way people look at expensive cars parked in the wrong neighborhood, confused but curious. "You're not from around here?" "No." "You in trouble?" "Not the kind you're thinking." Diane wiped down the espresso machine with a rag that had seen better days. "I can pay you $12.50 an hour, cash if you prefer. Morning shifts, 6 days a week. You'll need to learn the register, the machines, and how to smile at people even when they're being idiots. You interested?" $12.50 an hour. Victoria had made that much every 3 seconds last year. "When do I start?" "Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. Don't be late." Bawling. The apartment Victoria rented was above a laundromat, $450 a month. 1 bedroom, a kitchen the size of a closet, a bathroom with tiles that had probably been installed in 1987. The landlord, a man who introduced himself as simply Ray, took her cash deposit and handed her a key without asking for references or ID. "Heat's included. Don't flush anything weird. We're good." She climbed the narrow stairs and unlocked the door to her new life. The apartment smelled like detergent and old carpet. There was a futon that looked like it had survived at least 2 decades and a kitchen table with 1 wobbly leg. The window overlooked the parking lot and a view of absolutely nothing interesting. Victoria sat on the futon and cried for the first time in 3 years. Not because the apartment was terrible, because it was perfect. Nobody here knew who she was. Nobody wanted anything from her. The silence wasn't the carefully managed quiet of her penthouse. It was just silence. She opened her backpack and pulled out the one thing she'd allowed herself to bring from her old life. A photograph of her grandmother, the only person who'd ever seemed to love her without conditions. Her grandmother had grown up poor, worked as a seamstress, and told Victoria stories about making something from nothing. "You'd probably like this place, Gram," Victoria whispered to the photo. She set it on the windowsill and went to sleep on a futon that smelled faintly of someone else's life. The alarm went off at 5:15 a.m. Victoria had set 3 backups because some paranoid part of her brain still operated on CEO time, where being late meant losing millions. She dressed in the dark, jeans, a plain black sweater, the worn sneakers she'd bought at a Goodwill. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror looked strange, younger somehow, more like the girl she'd been before venture capital and board meetings and wealth that multiplied while she slept. The walk to Ember and Brew took 12 minutes. The streets were empty except for a guy delivering newspapers and a woman walking 3 small dogs. The sky was that particular shade of dark blue that comes right before dawn. Diane was already inside, prepping the machines. "You're early," she said. "I like that. I'm terrified of being late." Good instinct for this job. People get mean when they don't get their coffee on time. Diane handed her an apron. Today, you're just going to watch and learn. Tomorrow, you'll actually touch things. The first customer came in at 6:14, a man in his 30s, wearing work clothes and carrying a thermos. Morning, Diane. Morning, Frank. Usual? Please. Diane made him a large dark roast, no sugar, a splash of cream. She didn't charge him. He left $5 in the tip jar anyway. Regular? Victoria asked. Frank's a good guy. Electrician. Tips better than he should. Diane handed Victoria a rag. Here, you can learn the cleaning routine. The morning rush started around 7. Office workers, construction crews, parents dragging sleepy kids to school. Victoria watched Diane work with the efficiency of someone who'd been doing this for 20 years. She learned that the usual meant something different for every person. She learned that the guy who ordered the vanilla latte always asked for extra foam but actually wanted less. She learned that the woman with the purple coat was going through a divorce, and Diane always gave her a free cookie. You remember all this? Victoria asked during a brief lull. It's not about memory. It's about paying attention. Diane refilled the napkin dispensers. You actually care about people. The details stick. At 10:30, the door opened and a man walked in with a little girl. Victoria's training in reading people, picking up on body language, assessing threats and opportunities, kicked in automatically. The man was tall, maybe 6'2", early 30s, wearing a jacket that had been repaired multiple times and work boots that had seen serious use, but he moved with a kind of careful confidence that didn't match the clothes. The little girl, maybe 5 or 6, had dark curls and was wearing a backpack covered in cartoon characters. Daddy, can I have the special hot chocolate? If Diane says it's okay, the little girl ran up to the counter. Diane, can I have Chloe's special? Diane grinned. Well, since it's literally named after you, I think we can make that happen. The man, the girl's father, smiled. It was a tired smile, the kind Victoria recognized from looking in mirrors during particularly brutal quarters, but genuine. And for you, Ethan? Diane asked. Just black coffee, large. Coming up? Victoria found herself staring, not because the man was particularly handsome, though he was in an understated way, but because of how he interacted with his daughter, the care in how he helped her onto a stool, the way he listened when she launched into a story about something that happened at school, the quiet patience. Diane caught her looking. That's Ethan Cole, single dad, works maintenance and odd jobs. Good people. The hot chocolate is named after his daughter? Chloe's been coming here since she was 3. Ethan lets me experiment with recipes on her. Diane started making the drink. Chocolate, cinnamon, a touch of vanilla, whipped cream with rainbow sprinkles. He's had a rough go of it. Lost his wife when Chloe was a baby, been raising her on his own ever since. Victoria watched Ethan pay for their drinks, leave a generous tip despite the fact that his jacket was held together with duct tape in one spot. Watched him wipe whipped cream off Chloe's nose. Watched them leave together, the little girl chattering away while her father listened like she was saying the most important things in the world. You're staring, Diane said quietly. Sorry, he seems nice. He is. Also completely uninterested in dating, so don't get any ideas. I wasn't... Sure. Diane handed her a tray of dirty mugs. Go wash these. Welcome to glamorous coffee shop life. The first week passed in a blur of early mornings and aching feet. Victoria learned to work the espresso machine, burned herself twice, and got the hang of the register on day 4. She learned the regulars' names and orders. She learned that Diane had owned Ember & Brew for 15 years, that she'd bought it with her divorce settlement, and that she considered her customers more family than business. Why do you do it? Victoria asked on Saturday morning. It can't be profitable. Diane looked at her like she'd asked why the sky was blue. Profit? Honey, I clear about $30,000 a year after expenses. I do it because I like these people. I like being the place they start their morning. I like that Frank trusts me to make his coffee right. I like that Chloe's face lights up when she sees rainbow sprinkles. She paused. What'd you do before this? Consulting, Victoria lied smoothly. Corporate stuff, made good money, hated every second. Yeah, you've got that look. What look? Like you escaped something. Diane refilled the pastry case. It's fine. Everybody here is running from something or towards something, sometimes both. Ethan and Chloe came in every Tuesday and Thursday morning and every Saturday afternoon. Victoria learned that Chloe was 6.5, that her favorite color was purple, and that she wanted to be either a veterinarian or an astronaut when she grew up. She learned that Ethan never talked about himself, deflected personal questions with practiced ease, and always looked slightly exhausted. On her second Saturday, Chloe noticed her. "Are you new?" "I am. I'm Tori." "I'm Chloe. That's my daddy." She pointed at Ethan, who was looking at his phone. "Do you like working here?" "I do." "Diane's the best. She makes the best hot chocolate in the whole world. Also, she let me name it after myself, which is pretty cool." Victoria smiled. "That is pretty cool." Ethan glanced up from his phone. "Chloe, let the nice lady work." "She doesn't mind. Do you mind?" "Not at all." Ethan met her eyes for the first time. His were gray, she noticed. Tired gray but sharp, like he was used to assessing situations quickly. "Sorry," he said. "She's friendly." "It's fine. Really." He nodded and went back to his phone, but Victoria caught something in his expression, a flicker of assessment maybe, like he was filing away information. It reminded her uncomfortably of herself. Neck. Week 2 brought the first snow. Fat flakes that turned the whole city into a postcard. Victoria walked to work in the dark, watching her breath fog in the cold, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. No board meetings. No hostile takeover attempts. No journalists camping outside her building. No calculated friendships or networking events disguised as social gatherings. Just the walk to work, the routine of making coffee, the simple exchange of money for goods and smiles for tips. Diane taught her how to make latte art. Victoria's first attempt looked like a blob. "It's abstract," Diane said diplomatically. "It's terrible." "Yeah, but you'll get better. Everything's terrible at first." By the end of the week, Victoria could make a passable leaf pattern. Diane celebrated by letting her handle the morning rush solo for 20 minutes. "You're a natural," Diane said when she came back from the storage room. "I'm really not." "You are. You pay attention. You remember things. That's like 90% of the job." Diane started wiping down the counter. "The other 10% is giving a shit." "Do I pass that part?" "Jury's still out." But she was smiling. Du passad. Thursday of week 3, Ethan came in alone. "No, Chloe?" Victoria asked as she rang up his black coffee. "She's at school. I've got a repair job nearby. Figured I'd grab coffee first." He hesitated. "You're Tori, right?" "Right." "You settling in okay?" "Millbrook's not exactly exciting." "That's kind of the point." He nodded like he understood exactly what she meant. "Yeah, I get that." There was a pause. Not awkward exactly, but weighted. "Well, thanks for the coffee," he said. "Any time." He left, and Victoria found herself watching through the window as he climbed into a beat-up pickup truck that had more rust than paint. Watched him sit there for a moment before starting the engine like he was gathering himself for something. Diane appeared at her elbow. "I told you not to get ideas." "I'm not getting ideas." "You're looking at him like he's a puzzle you want to solve." Victoria turned away from the window. "I look at everyone like that." "Yeah, I've noticed." Diane handed her a fresh rag. "Be careful with that one, Tori. He's been through enough." "I'm not going to do anything." But that night, alone in her tiny apartment, Victoria realized Diane was right. She was getting ideas. Not romantic ones necessarily, though Ethan was attractive in an understated way. But she was curious about him. About the contradiction between the maintenance work and the way he carried himself, about the single father raising a daughter alone, about the careful way he seemed to move through the world, like he was hiding something, like her. The end of November brought a cold snap that froze the pipes in Victoria's building. Ray, the landlord, showed up with a space heater and a shrug. "It happens. Should be fixed in a day or two." "What am I supposed to do about water?" "There's a gym 3 blocks down. They've got showers. Or you could ask a neighbor." Victoria spent that evening at the 24-hour gym, paying $30 for a day pass just to take a hot shower. The absurdity of it hit her halfway through shampooing her hair with the cheap bottle she'd bought at the drugstore. 3 weeks ago, she'd had a bathroom bigger than this entire locker room. Heated floors, a shower with 6 different settings and water pressure that could strip paint, and she'd been miserable. Now she was standing in a slightly grimy gym shower, using bargain shampoo, and she felt fine. Better than fine. When she got back to her apartment, she found Ethan in the hallway, carrying a toolbox. "Ray called me," he explained. "I'm going to try to get the heat working tonight so the pipes don't freeze worse." "You're a plumber too?" "I'm whatever pays the bills." He paused. "You're in 2B, right?" "How'd you know?" "Small building. I've done work here before." He shifted the toolbox. "Might be loud. Sorry in advance." "It's fine. Thank you for fixing it." He nodded and headed toward the basement. Victoria went inside and tried to read, but kept getting distracted by the sounds of work below her, clanging pipes, running water, occasional cursing. Around midnight, her heat kicked back on with a groan. The next morning at the coffee shop, Ethan came in looking exhausted. "Rough night?" Victoria asked, pouring his coffee. "Ray's building needs to be condemned, not repaired. But yeah, got it working." He took a long drink. "You stayed warm?" "I did, thanks to you. Just doing my job." But there was something in his eyes, that same assessing look, like he was trying to figure her out. Join the club, Victoria thought. December arrived with more snow and the kind of cold that made walking to work feel like a polar expedition. Diane decorated the shop with lights and garland that was probably older than Victoria. Chloe helped, standing on a stool and hanging ornaments with serious concentration. "We have a tree at home," she told Victoria. "Daddy and I decorated it last night. We watched a movie and made popcorn and everything." "That sounds nice." "Do you have a tree?" Victoria thought about her penthouse, professionally decorated every year by people she paid. Perfect white lights, designer ornaments, zero warmth. "No," she said. "I don't." "You should come see ours, right, Daddy?" Ethan, who was fixing a loose leg on one of the chairs, looked up. "Chloe, I'm sure Tori's busy." "Are you busy?" Chloe asked. Victoria met Ethan's eyes, saw him trying to think of a polite way to rescind his daughter's invitation without hurting anyone's feelings. "I work most nights," Victoria said, "but that's sweet of you to offer." Chloe's face fell. "Oh, but maybe I could see pictures." "I can draw you a picture." "That would be perfect." Crisis averted. Ethan gave her a small nod of thanks. That night, Victoria sat in her apartment and admitted the truth to herself. She was developing feelings for a man she barely knew, a man who was clearly devoted to his daughter and his simple life, a man who would run screaming if he knew who she really was. She should leave, pack up, go back to Chicago, face the music. Her company probably thought she'd been kidnapped at this point. The board had definitely called an emergency meeting. Her disappearance was likely affecting stock prices. But every morning, she woke up and chose to stay one more day. The Saturday before Christmas, Chloe came in wearing reindeer antlers and carrying a folded piece of paper. "I drew your picture." She handed it to Victoria with great ceremony. Victoria unfolded it to find a crayon drawing of a Christmas tree with presents underneath and 3 stick figures labeled Daddy, Chloe, and Tori. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. "It's beautiful," she managed. "I put you in our family picture because you're nice and I like you." Ethan, behind her, looked mortified. "Chloe, it's okay," Victoria said quickly. "I love it. Thank you." She pinned it on the wall behind the counter next to the menu board. Diane saw it and raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. When they left, Ethan lingered at the door. "Sorry about that. She gets attached easily." "It's fine. She's a sweet kid." "Yeah, she is." He hesitated. "Look, I know she invited you over and you were polite about declining, but if you actually wanted to come by sometime, that would be okay. She'd love it. We're in the building where I fixed the pipes, 3A. Victoria's heart did something complicated. "You don't have to." "I'm not being polite." "Chloe's right. You're nice, and it's Christmas. Nobody should be alone at Christmas." He looked uncomfortable, like kindness didn't come naturally. "Just if you want." "Okay," Victoria heard herself say. "Yeah, that would be nice. Tomorrow? Around 6? I'm making dinner. Nothing fancy." Tomorrow works. After he left, Diane appeared beside her. Well, well, don't start. I'm not starting anything. I'm just observing that you said yes. He was being nice. He was. He's a good man, Tori, but he's also carrying a lot of weight. Just be gentle with both of them. Victoria looked at Chloe's drawing on the wall. 3 stick figures. A family. I will, she promised. She meant it. Victoria stood outside apartment 3. For a full 2 minutes before knocking. She'd changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on jeans and a sweater that didn't look too expensive or too cheap. In her hands, she held a bottle of wine from the corner store and a bag of cookies she'd stress bought at the last second. This was stupid. She was a billionaire CEO pretending to be a barista, about to have dinner with a single father and his 6-year-old daughter. Every part of this was a lie. She should turn around, go back to her apartment, pack her things, and disappear back to Chicago before this got more complicated. But before she could move, the door opened. Chloe stood there in pajamas covered with cartoon penguins, her hair still damp from a bath. You came! She grabbed Victoria's hand and pulled her inside. Daddy, Tori's here! The apartment was small, maybe smaller than Victoria's rental, but it was warm in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. String lights hung across the living room ceiling. The Christmas tree Chloe had drawn was real, slightly crooked, decorated with a chaotic mix of handmade ornaments and dollar store tinsel. A worn couch faced a TV that was at least 10 years old. Books were stacked on every available surface. A child's drawings covered the refrigerator. It looked like a home. Ethan emerged from the kitchen wearing an apron that said, "World's Okayest Cook." His hair was messy, and there was a spot of what looked like tomato sauce on his shirt. Hey, you found us. Hard to miss in a building this small. Fair point. He took the wine and cookies. You didn't have to bring anything. I didn't want to show up empty-handed. Well, thank you. He glanced at Chloe, who was still holding Victoria's hand. Chloe, maybe let Tori breathe? It's fine, Victoria said, and meant it. The dinner was spaghetti with meat sauce, garlic bread, and a salad that Chloe proudly announced she'd helped make. They ate at a small table that wobbled slightly, and Chloe talked nonstop about school, her best friend Emma, and a hermit crab she desperately wanted for Christmas. We've discussed the hermit crab situation, Ethan said patiently, multiple times. But Daddy, Emma has one, and she says they're so easy, and I'd take really good care of it. And Chloe, fine. She stabbed a piece of lettuce dramatically. But I'm putting it on my list for my birthday. Your birthday is in June. I'm planning ahead. Victoria found herself smiling. Actually smiling, not the corporate smile she'd perfected for cameras and investors. This was real. Ethan caught her eye across the table and gave her a look that said, "Welcome to my chaos." After dinner, Chloe insisted on showing Victoria her room. It was tiny, barely big enough for a twin bed and a small dresser, but every inch was decorated with the intense personality of a 6-year-old. Drawings covered the walls. Stuffed animals were arranged in what Chloe explained was family order. A shoebox under the bed held treasures that included rocks, a broken watch, and a snow globe with a missing piece. This is where I keep my really important stuff, Chloe said seriously. Daddy says everyone needs a place for important stuff. Your dad's right. Do you have important stuff? Victoria thought about the storage unit in Chicago that held the remnants of her actual life. Awards and plaques and framed magazine covers. None of it felt important anymore. Not really, she said. That's sad. Everyone should have important stuff. Back in the living room, Ethan was cleaning up the kitchen. Victoria started helping without asking, falling into an easy rhythm of washing while he dried. You don't have to do that, he said. I know. They worked in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Ethan said, Thank you for coming. Chloe's been talking about it all day. I think she's a little starved for, I don't know, adult female company that isn't her teacher or Diane. What about her mom's family? Ethan's hand stilled on the dish he was drying. Her mom didn't have family, just us, and then just me. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. But his voice said it wasn't. Car accident, Chloe was 8 months old. She doesn't remember her at all, which is probably a mercy. Victoria didn't know what to say to that. In her old life, she would have offered condolences with the efficient sympathy of someone checking a box. But standing in this small kitchen, watching this man who'd built an entire life around protecting his daughter, the corporate platitudes felt obscene. That must have been terrifying, she said instead, raising her alone. Ethan looked at her with surprise, like he hadn't expected honesty. Yeah, it was. Still is most days. I have no idea what I'm doing. I just try not to screw her up too badly. I think you're doing fine. You've known us for what, 2 weeks? Long enough to see that she's happy and loved and feels safe enough to be herself. That's not nothing. He studied her for a long moment. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know, someone more temporary. People don't usually stick around Millbrook. They pass through. Is that what you think I'm doing? Passing through? Aren't you? Victoria didn't have an answer for that. They finished the dishes in silence. Chloe appeared in her penguin pajamas, dragging a battered copy of a book about a mouse detective. Tori, will you read me a story? Chloe, I'm sure Tori wants to get home, Ethan started. I'd love to, Victoria interrupted. She sat on the couch with Chloe curled against her side and read about the mouse detective solving mysteries. Halfway through, she glanced up and saw Ethan watching them from the kitchen doorway. The expression on his face was complicated, sad and grateful and wary all at once. When the story ended, Chloe was yawning. Bedtime, Ethan said gently. But Daddy, no buts. Say goodnight to Tori. Chloe hugged her, fierce and sudden. Will you come back? If your dad says it's okay. It's okay, Ethan said quietly. You're welcome anytime. After Chloe went to bed, Ethan poured 2 glasses of the wine Victoria had brought, and they sat on opposite ends of the couch. The Christmas lights cast soft shadows across the room. This is nice, Victoria said. You're home. It feels lived in. That's a polite way of saying small and cluttered. No, I mean, it feels like people actually exist here, like it matters. Ethan tilted his head. Where did you live before Millbrook? Victoria's heart kicked. Chicago. Doing consulting work. Yeah. And you just left? More or less. That's not really an answer. I know. She took a drink of wine, buying time. Let's just say I needed to figure out if I could exist without the job defining me. And can you? I'm starting to think so. Ethan nodded slowly. I get that. After Sarah died, that's Chloe's mom, everyone kept telling me I was so strong, handling everything, being such a good father. But I didn't feel strong. I felt like I was drowning and just happened to be good at hiding it. He paused. It took me a long time to realize that being a good dad wasn't about being perfect. It was just about showing up every day and trying. You make it look easy. It's not. I'm making it up as I go. Most days I feel like I'm one mistake away from breaking her. Victoria thought about her own childhood. Parents who were present but disconnected. Nannies who changed every 6 months. A grandmother who died when Victoria was 12, taking the only unconditional love with her. I think kids are more resilient than we give them credit for, she said. And Chloe's lucky to have you. Or I'm lucky to have her. Still haven't figured out which. They sat in comfortable silence, drinking cheap wine in a small apartment while snow fell outside. Victoria couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this settled, like she could just exist without performing or calculating or managing. Around 10, she stood to leave. Thank you for dinner, she said at the door. Thank you for coming. Chloe will be talking about this for weeks. Just Chloe? Ethan smiled and it transformed his face, made him look younger, less tired. Yeah, just Chloe. But he was lying and they both knew it. Walking back to her apartment, Victoria felt the weight of her deception pressing down harder. Every moment with Ethan and Chloe made the lie bigger. She wasn't Tori the barista starting over. She was Victoria Hale, CEO, billionaire, fraud, and she was falling for a life she had no right to. The next morning at the coffee shop, Diane took one look at her and said, You went to dinner. How did you? Chloe came in before school, talked about nothing else, said you read her a story and you're coming back to visit. Is that a problem? Depends. What exactly are you doing, Tori? Victoria started wiping down the espresso machine, not meeting Diane's eyes. I'm just being friendly. No, you're getting involved. with a man who's been through hell and a little girl who attaches to people like Velcro. Diane's voice was gentle but firm. I like you, but I don't know you, and I need to know that you're not going to disappear on them. I'm not planning to disappear. Plans change, especially for people running from something. Victoria put down the rag. I would never hurt Chloe. Not on purpose, maybe, but hurt is hurt, intentional or not. Diane refilled the coffee beans. Just be careful, that's all I'm saying. The warning rattled around Victoria's head all day. She knew Diane was right. Getting closer to Ethan and Chloe was selfish. Eventually, her old life would catch up with her. Eventually, she'd have to choose between the truth and the lie. But when Ethan came in that afternoon and asked if she wanted to take a walk after her shift, she said yes. They walked through the neighborhood while the sun set early, turning the snow pink and gold. Ethan talked about growing up in Millbrook, about leaving for a while and then coming back. He was vague about what he'd done in between, and Victoria didn't push. She understood the need for privacy. What about you? He asked. Family? Parents are alive, but we're not close. They're more interested in their causes than their daughter. Siblings? Only child, which was probably a relief for everyone involved. Ethan laughed. I doubt that. You don't know me very well. No, but I'm starting to. They stopped at a small park, empty except for a few birds picking at the frozen ground. Ethan sat on a bench and she sat beside him, close enough to feel the warmth but not quite touching. Can I ask you something? He said. Sure. Why Millbrook? Of all the places you could have gone, why here? Randomness, mostly. I got off a bus and stayed. That's not really an answer either. Victoria smiled despite herself. You're right, it's not. She pulled her jacket tighter against the cold. The truth is, I was tired of being around people who only wanted me for what I could do for them. I wanted to know if anyone could just like me as a person. And the jury's still out. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, in a way that made her feel exposed. I like you, for the record. You barely know me. I know you're good with my daughter. I know you show up on time and work hard. I know you read a story without being asked, and you wash dishes without making it a big deal. I know you listen when people talk instead of just waiting for your turn to speak. He paused. That's enough to start with. Victoria's chest tightened. Ethan, you don't have to say anything. I'm not trying to make this weird. I just wanted you to know. They sat in silence as the temperature dropped and the sky darkened. When they finally walked back, Ethan's hand brushed against hers. Just a touch, probably accidental. But Victoria felt it like an electric shock. The weeks before Christmas blurred together in a pattern that felt dangerously like happiness. Victoria worked her shifts at the coffee shop, spent evenings at Ethan's apartment, reading to Chloe and helping with dinner, started learning the rhythms of their small world. She learned that Ethan was terrible at grocery shopping and always forgot something crucial. That Chloe had nightmares about monsters under the bed, and the only thing that helped was leaving the hallway light on. That Ethan sometimes disappeared late at night for emergency repairs and came back looking exhausted. She learned that despite having almost nothing, they were happy. Genuinely, authentically happy in a way Victoria had never experienced. But she also started noticing things that didn't add up. The way Ethan sometimes spoke about complex topics, economics, international markets, corporate strategy, with the casual knowledge of someone who'd been immersed in those worlds. The phone calls he took outside in the cold, speaking quietly in a tone she recognized from her own business calls. The fact that his beat-up truck had custom security features she only noticed because she'd installed similar ones in her own vehicles. Little inconsistencies, small cracks in the facade. One night, she was helping Chloe find a lost toy when she accidentally knocked over a stack of mail on Ethan's desk. Picking it up, she caught a glimpse of a letterhead. Not a utility bill or credit card statement, a law firm. The kind of law firm that charged $1,000 an hour. She quickly restacked the mail without reading further, but the seed of doubt had been planted. 2 days before Christmas, Diane asked Victoria to work a double shift. The regular afternoon person had called in sick, and they were short-staffed. I'll pay you time and a half, Diane offered. You don't have to do that. I know, but you've been reliable, and I appreciate it. Around 2 in the afternoon, during a rare lull, Victoria was restocking cups when she heard voices outside. She glanced through the window and froze. 3 black SUVs were parked down the street, not directly in front of the coffee shop, but close enough to be noticeable. Men in dark suits stood beside them, the kind of men who screamed private security or federal agents. Victoria's first instinct was panic. They'd found her. Someone had recognized her despite the different hair and cheap clothes. Her disappearance had triggered some investigation, and now, but then she saw where they were parked. Right outside her apartment building, the same building where Ethan lived. One of the suited men spoke into a radio. Moments later, the door to the building opened. Ethan walked out. But he didn't look like the Ethan she knew. He was wearing a tailored charcoal coat that probably cost more than Victoria's monthly rent at the coffee shop. His hair was styled. His posture was different, straighter, more commanding. He moved like someone used to people getting out of his way. One of the suited men opened the door of the middle SUV. Before getting in, Ethan looked down the street directly at the coffee shop. Victoria ducked behind the counter, heart hammering. When she looked again, the SUVs were pulling away. "What's wrong?" Diane appeared beside her. "You look like you saw a ghost." Nothing. I just thought I saw someone I knew." "In Millbrook?" "Unlikely." But Diane was wrong. Victoria had seen exactly who she thought she'd seen. The question was, who the hell was Ethan Cole? She couldn't concentrate for the rest of her shift. Her mind spun through possibilities. Witness protection? Undercover cop? Criminal? None of it made sense. The man she'd had dinner with, the man who read bedtime stories and made spaghetti in a cramped kitchen, couldn't be the same person who just climbed into a luxury SUV with private security. Except he clearly was. When her shift finally ended, Victoria walked back to her apartment building slowly, trying to process everything. In the lobby, she ran into Ray the landlord. "Hey, Tori, pipe's still working okay?" "Yeah, fine. Ray, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "The guy in 3A, Ethan, how long has he lived here?" Ray scratched his chin. "Cole? About 4 years, I think. Why?" "Just curious. He seems like a good tenant. Best one I've got. Always pays on time, never complains, fixes half the stuff himself. Wish I had 10 more like him." I don't know. Does he seem like he's hiding anything to you?" Ray laughed. "Lady, everyone in this building is hiding something. That's why they rent from me. I don't ask questions. They don't cause problems. It's a good system." Victoria went upstairs and stood outside Ethan's door for a long time before knocking. No answer. She tried calling the cell number he'd given her, straight to voicemail. Back in her own apartment, she paced. This was absurd. She was a billionaire CEO hiding her identity, getting worked up because the man she was developing feelings for might also be hiding his identity. The irony was so thick she almost laughed. Almost. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Hello? Ms. Hale." Her blood went cold. Nobody in Millbrook knew that name. "I think you have the wrong number," she said carefully. "No, I don't. My name is James Mitchell. I'm the head of security for Mercer Global Investments. I'm calling on behalf of my employer, who would very much like to meet with you." "I don't know what you're talking about. Please don't insult my intelligence. You're Victoria Hale, CEO of Hale Technologies. You've been missing for 6 weeks. Your company's stock has dropped 17%. Your board is in chaos. And you've been working at a coffee shop in Millbrook under the name Tori." Victoria sat down hard on her futon. "How did you find me?" "Does it matter? What matters is that my employer knows who you are, knows what you're doing, and would like to have a conversation." "Who's your employer?" "I think you already know." The line went dead. Victoria stared at her phone, trying to breathe normally. Mercer Global Investments. The name tickled something in her memory. She'd heard it before, back when she still read financial reports and tracked market movements. They were private, exclusive, almost impossible to research. Old money and new power wrapped in layers of shell corporations and offshore accounts. And Ethan's last name was Cole, not Mercer. Unless... She grabbed her laptop and started searching, using backdoors and databases she still had access to despite being off the grid. It took 40 minutes and several questionable hacking techniques, but she finally found it. Ethan Cole Mercer, heir to the Mercer fortune. Estimated net worth, somewhere between $4 and $6 billion. The beat-up truck, the small apartment, the maintenance jobs, all of it was a lie. Just like her. Victoria closed her laptop and laughed. It was either that or scream. She'd run away from her billionaire life to find authenticity, and she'd fallen for another billionaire doing the exact same thing. The universe had a sick sense of humor. There was a knock on her door. She opened it to find Ethan standing there, still in the expensive coat. His face was carefully neutral. "Can I come in?" She stepped aside. He walked to the center of her tiny apartment and turned to face her. "I know you saw me today, and I know you probably have questions." "You think?" "I can explain. Let me guess. You're not really a maintenance worker. The single dad thing is real, but everything else is performance. You're actually rich as hell and hiding out in Millbrook for... what? The same reason I am?" Ethan's expression shifted. "What do you mean, the same reason you are?" Victoria felt something break inside her. The exhaustion of lying, of performing, of trying to be someone she wasn't. She was tired. So damn tired. "My name's not Tori," she said flatly. "It's Victoria. Victoria Hale. I'm the CEO of a tech company you've probably heard of. I ran away from my life 6 weeks ago because I was lonely and wanted to know if anyone could love me for something other than my money. Congratulations, we're both frauds." The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan stared at her. Then, impossibly, he started laughing. Not cruel laughter. The kind of broken, exhausted laughter of someone who just realized the cosmic joke. "Victoria Hale," he said finally. "You're Victoria Hale. And you're Ethan Mercer. Cole Mercer. I go by my middle name." He sat down on her futon like his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. "This is insane." "You're telling me." They sat in silence, two liars staring at each other across 3 feet of cheap carpet. "How long have you known?" Victoria asked. "About you? 2 weeks? I had you investigated after Chloe got attached. I needed to make sure you weren't a threat. And I found out exactly who you were. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you without destroying whatever this is." "What about your security guy?" "Mitchell. He called you." "About an hour ago." Ethan cursed quietly. "I told him to wait. I wanted to handle this myself." "Handle what, exactly?" He looked at her with those tired gray eyes. "The fact that I've been lying to you. The fact that you've been lying to me. The fact that despite all of that, I've developed real feelings for you and I have no idea what to do about it." Victoria's heart lurched. "Ethan, don't. Just let me finish." He ran a hand through his hair, messing up the careful styling. "Everything about me was true except the money. I really did lose Sarah. I really am raising Chloe alone. The apartment, the truck, the jobs, all of it's real. I've been living this way since she was born because I wanted to protect her from the kind of life I grew up in. The wealth, the attention, the people who only see dollar signs when they look at you." "I know exactly what you mean." "Yeah, I guess you do." He stood up, started pacing. "I thought I could keep these worlds separate, keep Chloe safe in this small, normal life while managing the company remotely. It worked for years. And then you showed up, and for the first time since Sarah died, I felt something other than exhaustion." "So what now?" "I don't know. You tell me. You're the one who ran away from your entire life to work at a coffee shop." Victoria almost smiled. "That makes 2 of us." "Yeah, it does." They stood there in her tiny apartment, 2 people who'd built elaborate lies and found each other anyway. "I don't want to go back," Victoria said quietly, "to my old life. The emptiness of it." "I don't either, but we can't keep hiding forever. Chloe deserves better than a father who's lying about who he is. And your company needs you. Does it? Or does it just need my name on the letterhead?" Ethan looked at her seriously. "You built something real, Victoria. You don't get to just walk away because it's hard. That's rich coming from you." "I know. I'm a hypocrite, but I'm trying to do better for Chloe." He paused. "The question is, what are you trying to do? Because if this is just you slumming it until you get bored, I need to know now, before Chloe gets hurt." And there it was. The real question underneath all the lies and revelations. Victoria thought about Chloe's drawing on the coffee shop wall. 3 stick figures. A family she had no right to be part of. I don't know, she admitted. I don't know what I'm doing. I just know that for the first time in years, I felt like a person instead of a brand, and I don't want to lose that. Ethan nodded slowly. Okay, then we figure it out, together. No more lies. No more lies, Victoria agreed. But even as she said it, she wondered if that was possible. They'd built their entire connection on deception. Could anything real grow from that foundation? Ethan left a few minutes later, and Victoria sat alone in her apartment, staring at nothing. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The offer stands. When you're ready to talk, I'll be waiting. J.M. James Mitchell. Mercer's security chief. Victoria deleted the message and turned off her phone. Outside, snow began to fall again, covering Millbrook in fresh white lies. Victoria didn't sleep that night. She sat on her futon watching the snow fall outside her window, trying to figure out which version of herself was real anymore. The CEO who commanded boardrooms, the barista who burned herself on espresso machines, the woman who read bedtime stories to a 6-year-old and felt her heart crack open? Maybe all of them. Maybe none of them. Around 5 in the morning, she gave up on sleep and walked to the coffee shop in the dark. Diane wasn't there yet, but Victoria had a key now. She let herself in and started the opening routine on autopilot, grinding beans, warming machines, counting the register. Simple tasks. Honest work. Diane arrived at 6:15 and took one look at her. You look like hell. Thanks. Want to talk about it? Not really. Does it have to do with Ethan? Victoria's hand stilled on the espresso machine. Why would you think that? Because you've got that look people get when they realize the thing they wanted isn't what they thought it was. Diane started pulling chairs down from tables. Also, he came by last night after close asking if I'd seen you. He looked pretty rough, too. What did you tell him? That you'd worked your shift and left. What's going on, Tori? The fake name felt like sandpaper in Victoria's ears. It's complicated. It usually is. Diane paused at the door to the back room. Look, I don't know what happened between you two, and I'm not asking, but I do know that man hasn't let anyone get close in 4 years. And I know you're not as simple as you pretend to be either. So whatever this is, maybe consider that running away isn't always the answer. She disappeared into the back before Victoria could respond. The morning rush was brutal. Everyone wanted elaborate drinks, people were impatient about wait times, and Victoria dropped a full carafe of coffee that shattered across the floor. By 9 o'clock, she was seriously considering walking out and never coming back. Then Chloe came in. She was with a woman Victoria had never seen before. Late 20s, professional looking, clearly uncomfortable in the coffee shop. Hi, Tori, Chloe waved enthusiastically. This is Kelly. She's my babysitter for today. Nice to meet you, the woman said with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. Where's your dad? Victoria asked, trying to sound casual. Chloe's face fell a little. He had to go away for work. He said he'd be back tomorrow, but I don't know. Sometimes his work trips take longer. I see. Kelly ordered a coffee and a hot chocolate, paid, and guided Chloe toward a table. But Chloe pulled away and came back to the counter. Are you and Daddy fighting? She asked quietly. Victoria's chest tightened. What makes you think that? He seemed really sad last night, and you look sad now. Adults always say they're fine when they're sad, but I can tell. We're not fighting, sweetheart. We're figuring some things out. Are you going to stop coming over? The question hit Victoria like a physical blow. I don't know. Chloe's eyes filled with tears. I knew it. Everyone always leaves. Chloe. But the little girl was already walking back to Kelly, her shoulders hunched. Kelly gave Victoria a sharp look, like this was somehow her fault, and guided Chloe out of the coffee shop. Victoria stood frozen behind the counter until Diane's voice cut through the fog. Go. What? Your shift's over in 20 minutes anyway. Go. Fix whatever you broke. I don't even know where he is. Then figure it out. You're supposedly smart, right? Victoria pulled off her apron and grabbed her coat. She had no plan, no idea where to start. But Diane was right about one thing. She couldn't just stand here and do nothing. Outside, the cold hit her like a slap. She walked toward Ethan's apartment building, then stopped. He wasn't there. He was away on business, which meant he'd gone back to his real life. The one with private security and tailored coats and billion-dollar decisions. the one she'd spent 6 weeks trying to escape. She stood on the sidewalk, breath fogging in the winter air, and made a choice. She pulled out her phone and turned it back on for the first time in hours. It immediately started buzzing with notifications, but she ignored them and dialed the number from Mitchell's text. He answered on the first ring. "Ms. Hale?" "Where is he?" "Ethan, Chicago, emergency board meeting." "For Mercer Global?" "Yes." "I want to meet. You said your employer wanted to talk. I'm ready." There was a pause. "When?" "Now. Today. I'm done hiding. I'll send a car. 1 hour." The line went dead. Victoria walked back to her apartment, climbed the stairs, and looked around the tiny space that had been her sanctuary. The futon with its lumpy cushions, the wobbly kitchen table, the photograph of her grandmother on the windowsill. She'd been happy here, in this nothing apartment with its cheap rent and thin walls. Happier than she'd been in her penthouse with its designer furniture and perfect view. But happiness built on lies wasn't sustainable. She'd known that. She'd just been too scared to admit it. She packed her few belongings into the same backpack she'd arrived with, left the key on the counter with a note for Ray, and went downstairs to wait. The car that pulled up 45 minutes later was a black Mercedes. Not an SUV, nothing ostentatious, just expensive and efficient. The driver didn't speak, just held the door and waited. Victoria took one last look at Millbrook. The coffee shop where Diane was probably covering her abandoned shift. The park where she'd sat with Ethan in the cold. The building where Chloe lived, where Victoria had briefly pretended to be part of a family. She got in the car. The drive to Chicago took 3 hours. Victoria spent most of it staring out the window, watching the landscape shift from small-town quiet to suburban sprawl to urban density. Her phone kept buzzing, messages from her assistant, her board, her lawyers. She ignored them all, except one. "Diane, did you run?" Victoria typed back, "I'm trying to run toward something instead of away. Thanks for everything." The response came immediately. "You're welcome back anytime. The job's still yours if you want it." Victoria closed her eyes and fought back tears. The car pulled up to a high-rise in the financial district. Not the tallest building, but elegant. Old money. Not new. The kind of place that didn't need to advertise its importance. Mitchell met her in the lobby. He was exactly what she'd expected. Mid-40s, fit, alert eyes that missed nothing. "Ms. Hale, thank you for coming. Did I have a choice?" "Everyone has choices. Some are just harder than others." He gestured toward the elevators. "Mr. Mercer is waiting." They rode to the 42nd floor in silence. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse office that made Victoria's corporate headquarters look modest. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Art that belonged in museums hung on the walls. Everything was understated and perfect. And standing by the window, still wearing the charcoal coat, was Ethan. He turned when he heard the elevator. His face was carefully neutral, but Victoria could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "Thank you, Mitchell. That's all." The security chief nodded and disappeared back into the elevator. Victoria and Ethan stared at each other across an acre of polished floor. "Nice office," she said finally. "It's my father's. Was my father's. I don't use it much." "Why are we here?" Ethan walked toward her, hands in his pockets. "Because I needed you to see this. The real version of my life. No more small apartment and beat-up truck. This is what I'm hiding from." Victoria looked around at the perfect office with its perfect view. "I get it. Believe me, I get it." "Do you?" "Because I've been thinking about what you said last night. About not knowing what you're doing, about wanting to feel like a person instead of a brand. And I realized we have the same problem. Which is? We're both so terrified of being used that we'd rather hide than risk being vulnerable." He stopped a few feet away. "I've been doing this for 4 years, Victoria. Living 2 lives. Playing maintenance worker during the day, running a billion-dollar company at night. Lying to Chloe about why I'm always tired, why I can't go to school events, why we live the way we do. You're protecting her. Am I? Or am I protecting myself?" His voice cracked slightly. "She asked me this morning why you weren't coming over anymore. And I didn't have an answer, because the truth is I pushed you away the second things got real, the second my cover was blown. I'm the one who lied first. We both lied. That's the point." He ran a hand through his hair. "I had Mitchell investigate you because I was scared. Scared that Chloe was getting attached to someone who might leave. Scared that I was falling for someone who wasn't real. And when I found out who you were, my first instinct was to shut down, to protect us before we could get hurt. Victoria felt something shift in her chest. So what changed? You did. Last night, when you just admitted everything. No excuses, no spin. You didn't try to manipulate the situation or control the narrative. You just told the truth. He took a step closer. Do you know how rare that is? In our world? Someone who just says what they actually mean? I was tired of lying. So am I. They stood in silence, two people who'd spent their lives building walls, finally admitting they were exhausted from the construction. I don't know how to do this, Victoria said quietly. The honest version. I've been performing for so long, I don't even know what's underneath anymore. Then we figure it out together. No more hiding, no more separate lives. Ethan's voice was steady, but his eyes were uncertain. I want to try. With you. If you're willing. What about Chloe? Chloe deserves the truth too. She deserves a father who isn't lying about who he is. And if you're going to be in her life, she deserves to know the real you. Victoria thought about the little girl with the penguin pajamas and the fierce hugs. She's going to hate me when she finds out I lied. Maybe, probably, but she'll get over it if we prove we're worth trusting. He held out his hand. What do you say? Want to try being honest for a change? Victoria looked at his hand, then at his face. Saw the fear there, hidden under the careful control. He was just as terrified as she was. She took his hand. Okay, no more lies. No more lies. But even as she said it, Victoria wondered if it was already too late. They'd built their entire relationship on deception. Could they really rebuild on truth? They spent the next 2 hours in Ethan's inherited office, telling each other everything, the real versions of their lives. Victoria talked about her company, the pressure, the loneliness, the way success had isolated her until she couldn't tell who genuinely cared and who just wanted access. Ethan talked about inheriting Mercer Global at 28, about trying to run a financial empire while raising a baby alone, about the exhaustion of maintaining two identities. I thought if I could just keep them separate, I could give Chloe a normal childhood, he said, but I'm starting to realize I was really just giving her half a father. You're a good dad, Ethan. She knows you love her. Love isn't enough sometimes. She needs stability, honesty, a parent who isn't constantly lying about where he goes and what he does. Victoria understood that better than he knew. Her own parents had loved her, in their way, but they'd been absent, distracted by their own pursuits. Love without presence was just a word. So what now? She asked. We both go back to our real lives and pretend Millbrook never happened? Is that what you want? No, but I don't know what I want instead. Ethan stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. I've been thinking about that, about what it would take to actually merge these two worlds instead of keeping them separate. Stop hiding who I am. Be honest with Chloe about the company, the money, all of it. That's terrifying. Yeah, it is. He turned back to face her. But the alternative is spending the rest of my life lying to my daughter and anyone else I care about. And I'm done with that. Victoria joined him at the window. Somewhere out there was her own company, her own responsibilities. People who'd been covering for her absence, dealing with the fallout of her disappearance. She'd been selfish, running away like that. However justified her reasons, she'd abandoned people who depended on her. I need to go back, she said quietly, to my company. Face the board. Deal with the mess I created. I know, but I don't want to go back to who I was before. The person who worked 18-hour days and couldn't name a single real friend. I don't want that life anymore. Ethan put his hand over hers on the windowsill. Then don't. Build something different. You're the CEO. You get to decide what that means. It's not that simple. Why not? Victoria almost laughed. Because I have investors and a board and market expectations and you're one of the most powerful people in tech. If you can't change the rules, who can? He had a point. She'd spent so long playing by other people's definitions of success that she'd forgotten she could write her own. What about you? She asked. What are you going to do? I'm going to tell Chloe the truth, everything. And then I'm going to start actually running Mercer Global instead of hiding from it. Be present instead of pretending. He squeezed her hand. And I'm going to ask you on a real date. No lies, no performance, just us. What if we don't work without the fantasy of Millbrook? Then we don't work. But at least we'll know it was real. Victoria looked at their reflection in the window. Two people who'd been pretending for so long they'd almost forgotten how to be authentic. Okay, she said. Let's try. Mitchell knocked on the office door an hour later. Ms. Hale, your assistant has been calling. She says it's urgent. Victoria checked her phone. 37 missed calls. Right. I should probably deal with that. Use the conference room, Ethan offered. I need to pick up Chloe anyway. Kelly charges overtime after 6. They rode the elevator down together, and when they reached the lobby, Ethan kissed her. Not a dramatic movie kiss, just a brief, honest moment. I'll call you tonight, he said, after I talk to Chloe. Good luck. Yeah, I'm going to need it. She watched him leave, then found the conference room and called her assistant. Victoria, oh thank God, we've been trying to reach you for weeks. The board is threatening a vote of no confidence. The stock is tanking, and there are rumors you had a breakdown. I'm fine, Sarah. I'm in Chicago. I'll be at headquarters tomorrow morning. Tomorrow? Victoria, we need you now. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Call an all-hands meeting. Board, executives, everyone. What are you going to tell them? Victoria looked at her reflection in the conference room window. Cheap clothes, messy hair, no makeup. She looked more like herself than she had in years. The truth, she said. I'm going to tell them the truth. She hung up before Sarah could respond. The hotel Mitchell had arranged was predictably perfect. Victoria stood in the shower for 20 minutes, letting the hot water wash away 6 weeks of pretending. Then she ordered room service, pulled out her laptop, and started preparing for tomorrow. Not a speech, not a performance, just honesty. Around 9, her phone rang. Ethan. How did it go? She asked. There was a long pause. Not great. What happened? I told her everything. About the company, the money, why we really live in Millbrook. She listened to the whole thing and then asked me if I'd been lying about you too. Victoria's stomach dropped. What did you say? I said we'd both been lying about who we were, and she said, his voice cracked. She said she didn't want to talk to me right now. She's locked herself in a room. Ethan, I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. It's mine. I should have told her the truth years ago instead of building this elaborate lie. He sighed. She's 6. She shouldn't have to deal with this. She's also smart and resilient. Give her time to process. I know. I just hate that I hurt her. They talked for another hour. Not about solutions or plans, just about the mess they'd created and the fear of what came next. It was the most honest conversation Victoria had had in years, and it was about failure and uncertainty and pain. When they finally hung up, Victoria sat in the dark hotel room and admitted the truth to herself. She had no idea if this would work, if they could actually build something real after starting with lies, if Chloe would forgive them, if their respective companies would survive the truth. But for the first time in her adult life, she was willing to try without knowing the outcome. That had to count for something. The next morning, Victoria walked into Hale Technologies headquarters wearing the same jeans and sweater she'd bought at Target 6 weeks ago. The security guard did a double take. Ms. Hale? Is that you? It's me, Marcus. Still remember how to use your badge? Yes, ma'am. We've missed you around here. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt surreal. She'd built this company from nothing, grown it into a billion-dollar empire, and then walked away because she couldn't stand to be here anymore. Now she was back, but different, changed in ways she was still trying to understand. Sarah met her at the elevator, looking simultaneously relieved and stressed. Everyone's in the main conference room. The board is not happy, Victoria. They're talking about removing you as CEO. Let them try. What? I said let them try. Victoria walked toward the conference room. I'm done performing, Sarah. If they want me out, they can vote, but they're going to hear the truth first. She opened the conference room door to find 23 people staring at her. Board members, executives, investors. Every one of them had questions, demands, expectations. Victoria took her seat at the head of the table and looked at each of them in turn. I'm sure you all have things you want to say, but I'm going to talk first, and you're going to listen. Then we'll discuss next steps. The board chair, a man named Douglas, who'd never liked her, leaned forward. Victoria, Your disappearance cost this company millions. You owe us an explanation. You're right. I do. She took a breath. 6 weeks ago, I walked away from this company because I was lonely, exhausted, and couldn't remember the last time I'd had a conversation that wasn't transactional. I went to a small town, got a job at a coffee shop, and tried to figure out if anyone could care about me without knowing I was rich. The room was silent. That was selfish, Victoria continued. I abandoned my responsibilities and left all of you to deal with the fallout. I'm sorry for that, but I'm not sorry for leaving because I learned something important. And what's that? Douglas asked sarcastically. That I'd built a company I didn't even like being part of. That success without meaning is just expensive emptiness. And that I'd rather risk failure trying to build something authentic than continue succeeding at something hollow. One of the younger board members, a woman named Jennifer, spoke up. What are you proposing? Changes, big ones. We're going to restructure how we operate. More focus on quality over quarterly earnings. Better work-life balance for employees, starting with me. Transparency about our values and practices. We're going to build a company that people actually want to work for, not just one that looks good in financial reports. Douglas laughed. That's insane. Our investors will revolt. Then they can sell their shares. I don't care anymore. Victoria stood up. I built this company because I had an idea I believed in. Somewhere along the way, it became about growth and profit and market dominance. But that's not why I started this, and it's not why I'm staying. You're talking about destroying shareholder value, Douglas said. I'm talking about creating actual value, the kind that lasts, the kind that means something. She looked around the table. Any of you who want to be part of that, I'd love to have you. Anyone who doesn't, there's the door. I'll buy out your shares myself if I have to. The room erupted into arguments. Half the board thought she'd lost her mind. The other half looked intrigued. Victoria let them argue for a few minutes, then held up her hand. I'm not asking for permission. I'm the majority shareholder and CEO. This is happening. The only question is whether you're coming with me or not. She walked out of the conference room and went to her office. Through the glass walls, she could see the chaos she'd left behind. People arguing, making calls, probably planning their exit strategies. Sarah appeared in her doorway. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the stupidest. Probably both. What happens now? I have no idea, but I'm tired of pretending I do. Victoria sat down at her desk for the first time in weeks. Sarah, can I ask you something honest? Sure. Do you actually like working here? Not the salary or prestige, the actual work. Sarah hesitated. Sometimes, when we're solving real problems. The rest of the time, it feels like we're just moving money around and calling it innovation. Yeah, that's what I thought. Victoria turned on her computer. Want to help me figure out how to fix that? You're serious about this? Completely. Sarah smiled. Then yeah, I'm in. They spent the rest of the day mapping out changes. Some board members resigned. Others cautiously signed on to the new direction. Douglas threatened lawsuits, but ultimately backed down when Victoria pointed out that she had controlling interest and wasn't violating any legal obligations. By 6 p.m., Victoria was exhausted but felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Her phone buzzed. Ethan. How did it go? I might have just destroyed my company. You? Chloe still isn't talking to me, so about the same. Victoria laughed despite everything. We're really good at this. The worst. He paused. Want to have dinner? Somewhere that's not a coffee shop or either of our offices? Like a real date? Exactly like a real date. Okay, yeah. Let's do that. They met at a small restaurant neither of them had been to before. Nothing fancy, just a place with good food and quiet corners. They sat across from each other and ordered without looking at prices or worrying about being photographed. How does it feel? Ethan asked. Being back? Strange, like wearing an old coat that doesn't fit quite right anymore. Victoria picked at her food. I keep waiting for the panic to hit, for the old instincts to kick in. But I just feel calm. That's probably a bad sign. Or maybe it's a good one. They talked about their days. The chaos of Victoria's board meeting, Chloe's continued silence, the uncertainty of what came next. It wasn't romantic or particularly uplifting, but it was real. When they left the restaurant, Ethan walked her to her car. I should probably get back to Chloe. Kelly's been there all day, and I'm sure she's ready to leave. Give her my love, if she'll accept it. She will. Eventually. He kissed her forehead. This is weird, right? Dating like normal people? So weird. Want to do it again? Yeah, I really do. Victoria drove back to her penthouse. She hadn't given it up, just hadn't been there in weeks, and stood in the middle of her perfect living room feeling like a stranger in her own life. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Ms. Hale, this is Diane from the coffee shop. Victoria's heart jumped. Diane, how did you get this number? Ethan gave it to me. I hope that's okay. Of course. Is everything all right? That depends. Are you coming back? Victoria looked around her penthouse. 47th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, everything she'd thought she wanted. I don't know, she said honestly. I don't think I can do both. Be who I was here and who I was there. Then don't. Be someone new. Diane's voice was gentle. Your job's still here if you want it. Part-time, full-time, whatever you need. But only if you're actually in it, you know? No more hiding. I wasn't hiding. Sure you were. From him, from yourself, from everything. And that's fine. We all hide sometimes. But you can't build anything real while you're pretending to be someone you're not. After they hung up, Victoria stood at her window and thought about Millbrook, the tiny apartment, the coffee shop, Chloe's drawings and Ethan's tired smile, and the simple piece of making lattes for people who just wanted caffeine. She couldn't go back to that. Not exactly. But maybe she didn't have to choose between two completely separate lives. Maybe she could build something in between. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. Chloe wants to know if you're still coming to her Christmas pageant next week. I told her I'd ask. Victoria typed back, I'll be there. Front row. The response was immediate. She says you have to come as yourself, though. No more pretending. Victoria smiled and sent one final message. Deal. No more pretending. Outside her window, Chicago glittered in the winter night. Somewhere in this city, Ethan was putting his daughter to bed. Somewhere, her company was either collapsing or transforming. Somewhere, the life she'd run away from was waiting to see if she'd come back or burn it all down. And for the first time in 6 weeks, Victoria knew exactly what she wanted to do. The week leading up to Chloe's Christmas pageant was the longest of Victoria's life. She threw herself into restructuring Hale Technologies, working 16-hour days not because she had to, but because sitting still meant thinking about a 6-year-old girl who wasn't talking to her father and probably hated her. 3 board members resigned. 2 major investors pulled out. The stock dropped another 8%. Victoria's lawyer called every day with increasingly dire warnings about shareholder lawsuits and fiduciary responsibility. She ignored most of it. Instead, she focused on the things that actually mattered. She instituted a company-wide policy limiting emails after 6 p.m. She hired a director of employee wellness. She started actually talking to the engineers and developers who built the products instead of just reading reports about them. Her executive team thought she'd lost her mind. You can't run a tech company like a nonprofit, her CFO said during a heated meeting. We have obligations to our investors. Our obligation is to build something worthwhile, Victoria shot back. If the investors don't like it, they can leave. I'm not interested in making rich people richer while our employees burn out. That's not how capitalism works. Then maybe capitalism needs to work differently. She left the meeting early and drove to Millbrook. She hadn't planned to go back so soon, but the walls of her office had started closing in, and she needed air that didn't smell like desperation and expensive cologne. The coffee shop was busy when she arrived. Diane was behind the counter, making drinks with the same efficient calm Victoria remembered. She looked up when the door chimed and her face registered surprise. Well, look who decided to come back. Hi, Diane. You want your old apron or are you just visiting? Victoria almost smiled. Can I talk to you? When you have a minute? Give me 5. She waited at a corner table, watching Diane work. The ease of it. The simple transaction of making someone's coffee exactly how they liked it. No board meetings, no stock prices, just human connection wrapped in caffeine. When Diane finally sat down across from her, she studied Victoria with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. You look tired. I am tired. So why are you here instead of sleeping in whatever fancy bed you actually own? Because I don't know what I'm doing. The admission came out harder than Victoria intended. I went back to my company thinking I could change things, make them better. But everyone thinks I'm having a breakdown. My board hates me. Investors are bailing, and I can't stop thinking about Chloe. Have you talked to her? Ethan says she's still not ready. She feels betrayed, which is fair. We both lied to her. Diane leaned back in her chair. You know what I think your problem is? I'm sure you're going to tell me. You're still trying to control everything. The company, the relationship, the outcome. You're just doing it with different words now. Diane's voice was kind but firm. You can't restructure your way into authenticity, Victoria. That's not your real name, is it? Victoria shook her head. Didn't think so. Too corporate. Diane smiled slightly. Look, I don't know what you and Ethan are doing or where it's going, but I know that little girl upstairs is hurting, and she's hurting because the two adults she trusted most treated her like a variable instead of a person. That's not what we meant to do. Doesn't matter what you meant. It's what happened. Diane stood up. You want my advice? Stop trying to figure out how to fix everything. Just be honest. With her. With yourself. Messy, imperfect honesty. That's all any of us really have. She walked back to the counter, leaving Victoria alone with her coffee and the uncomfortable truth. That night, Victoria sat in her hotel room. She'd been staying at a place near headquarters, unable to face the penthouse, and called Ethan. How is she? The same. She talks to me about school and what she wants for Christmas, but the second I try to discuss what happened, she shuts down. He sounded exhausted. I don't know how to fix this. Diane said something today about how we treated Chloe like a variable instead of a person. That sounds about right. She also said we can't control our way out of this. We just have to be honest and let her process it however she needs to. Ethan was quiet for a moment. When did you become the wise one? I'm not wise. I'm just repeating what someone smarter told me. Fair enough. She heard him moving around, probably pacing. He did that when he was stressed. The pageant is in 3 days. She still wants you there. I asked her again this morning, and she said, and I quote, yes, but only if she comes as her real self. Victoria's throat tightened. What did you tell her about me? About who I really am? The truth. That you run a big company. That you were hiding just like I was. That you came to Millbrook for the same reason we lived there, to feel normal. He paused. She asked if you were going to leave now that we know about each other. What did you say? I said I didn't know, because I don't. I'm not leaving, Ethan. I'm trying to build something different, something that lets me be both people. Is that possible? I don't know, but I'm going to try. They talked until nearly midnight, not solving anything, just existing together through the phone. When Victoria finally hung up, she felt marginally less alone. The next 2 days passed in a blur of work and anxiety. Victoria finalized the restructuring plans, dealt with another wave of investor panic, and had 3 separate arguments with her CFO about whether integrity and profitability could coexist. You're going to bankrupt us, he said flatly. Then I'll bankrupt us doing something I believe in instead of getting rich doing something I hate. On the morning of the pageant, Victoria woke up at 5 a.m. with her stomach in knots. She'd promised Chloe she would come as herself, but she had no idea what that meant anymore. The CEO in designer suits? The barista in Target jeans? Something in between? She settled on nice jeans, a sweater that didn't look cheap, but wasn't aggressively expensive, and minimal makeup. Her hair was down instead of styled. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Not the Victoria Hale from magazine covers. Not Tori the barista. Someone new. Someone still figuring it out. The drive to Millbrook took 2 hours. Victoria spent most of it rehearsing what she'd say to Chloe, then abandoning each script because they all sounded fake. By the time she pulled into the parking lot of Millbrook Elementary School, her hands were shaking. The school gym was decorated with construction paper snowflakes and a somewhat crooked stage. Parents filled the folding chairs, phones ready to record their kids' performances. Victoria stood in the back, scanning for Ethan. She found him in the 3rd row, sitting alone. He'd saved the seat next to him with his coat. Victoria made her way over, acutely aware of people staring. She didn't belong here. These were normal families with normal lives, and she was a billionaire pretending to be one of them. Hey, Ethan said when she sat down. He looked as nervous as she felt. Hey, where's Chloe? Backstage with the other kids. She's playing a reindeer. He almost smiled. She has antlers and everything. I can't wait to see that. They sat in awkward silence while the gym filled up. Victoria kept catching people looking at her, whispering. Someone clearly recognized her, or maybe they just sensed she didn't fit. "Does everyone know?" she asked quietly. "About us?" "Probably. It's Millbrook. Everyone knows everything." Ethan shifted in his seat. Diane might have mentioned to a few people that the barista from Ember and Brew was actually a CEO. Word travels fast. "Great. Hey." He took her hand right there in front of everyone. "We said no more hiding, remember?" The pageant started with an off-key rendition of a holiday song, followed by the kindergartners dressed as snowmen. Then came Chloe's class, first graders playing reindeer and elves. Chloe was in the front row, wearing brown felt antlers that kept sliding sideways. When she saw Victoria and Ethan sitting together, her face went through about 5 different emotions before settling on careful blankness. She performed her part perfectly, said her lines about helping Santa, didn't fidget too much, but her eyes kept drifting to where they sat. Victoria wanted to wave, to smile, to do something to let her know it was okay, but she forced herself to just watch and let Chloe have her moment. After the pageant, parents swarmed the stage to congratulate their kids. Victoria hung back, giving Chloe space. But then the little girl appeared in front of them, antlers still crooked, looking at Victoria with an expression too serious for a 6-year-old. "You came. I said I would. As yourself?" Victoria knelt down to Chloe's level. "I'm trying to figure out who that is, but yeah, this is as close as I can get right now." Chloe studied her for a long moment. "Daddy said you're really important, that you run a big company." "I do." "And you pretended to work at the coffee shop?" "Yes." "Why?" Victoria glanced at Ethan, who gave her a look that said, "You're on your own." She turned back to Chloe. "Because I was lonely. And I wanted to know if people could like me without knowing about my job or my money. I wanted to feel normal. That's what Daddy does too. He pretends to be normal, but he's actually really rich." "Yeah, we're both pretty good at pretending." Chloe's lower lip trembled. "I don't like it when people pretend. It makes me feel stupid." Victoria's heart cracked. "You're not stupid. You're one of the smartest people I know. We're the ones who messed up, not you. Are you going to leave now that everyone knows? Do you want me to leave?" Chloe didn't answer right away. She looked at her father, then back at Victoria. "I don't know. I like Tori. But Tori wasn't real. Parts of her were real. The parts that cared about you and your dad. The parts that loved reading you stories and eating your dad's terrible spaghetti." Victoria smiled slightly. "The name was fake, but the feelings weren't." "Daddy's spaghetti isn't terrible," Chloe said, which wasn't exactly forgiveness, but wasn't rejection either. Ethan stepped in, putting a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Hey, kiddo, why don't we get some hot chocolate and talk about this? All 3 of us?" Chloe hesitated, then nodded. They ended up at Ember and Brew, which was quiet on a Sunday afternoon. Diane took one look at them and pointed to the corner table. "I'll bring drinks. You 3 work your stuff out." Chloe sat across from Victoria and Ethan, still wearing her reindeer antlers. She stirred her hot chocolate with intense concentration, clearly trying to organize her thoughts. "I want to ask you questions," she said finally, "and you have to tell me the truth. No more pretending." "Deal," Victoria said. "Are you really a CEO?" "Yes." "Are you really rich? Like really, really rich?" "Yes." "Richer than Daddy?" Victoria glanced at Ethan, who shrugged. "About the same, actually." Chloe processed this. "So, you didn't need to work at the coffee shop?" "No, I wanted to, because it made me feel like a regular person instead of just someone who makes decisions about technology." "Do you miss it? Being the CEO?" Victoria thought about that honestly. "I miss parts of it. I miss building things, solving problems. But I don't miss the pressure or the loneliness. And I definitely don't miss the person I was becoming." "What kind of person?" "Someone who forgot that people matter more than success." Chloe nodded like this made sense. Then she turned to her father. "Your turn. Are you really rich too?" "Yes." "So we don't have to live in that small apartment?" Ethan looked pained. "No, we don't have to. I chose to because I wanted to protect you from the kind of life I grew up in, where everyone wants something from you and you never know who your real friends are." "Did you think I couldn't handle it?" "I thought I couldn't handle it. I was scared of messing you up. You're not messing me up, Daddy. You're just being weird. Chloe took a drink of her hot chocolate, leaving a whipped cream mustache. Do we have to keep pretending to be poor? We were never pretending to be poor. We were living simply. There's a difference. But you lied about having money. Yeah, I did. Ethan looked at his daughter with naked honesty. And I'm sorry. You deserve to know the truth. Chloe was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Emma's dad works at the bank. She lives in a nice house and has her own room. Can I have my own room? Despite everything, Ethan laughed. Yeah, kiddo, you can have your own room. And the hermit crab? Don't push it. Chloe grinned, and for the first time in a week, she looked like herself again. But then her expression got serious again, and she looked at Victoria. Are you and Daddy boyfriend and girlfriend? Victoria felt her face heat. We're figuring that out. Do you love him? Chloe, Ethan started. No, it's okay. Victoria met the little girl's eyes. I think I do. I'm still figuring that out too. Do you love me? The question hit Victoria like a physical blow. Yes, absolutely yes. Even though you lied? I lied about my name and my job. I never lied about caring about you. Chloe nodded slowly. Okay, I'm still mad at you both, but I don't want you to leave. I'm not leaving, Victoria promised. Good, because you're better at reading stories than Daddy is. He does all the voices wrong. Ethan looked offended. I do not do the voices wrong. You do. You make the mouse sound like a pirate. That's called creative interpretation. Chloe rolled her eyes in a way that was pure 6-year-old exasperation, and Victoria felt something loosen in her chest. They weren't fixed. The trust wasn't magically restored, but they were talking, and that was a start. Diane brought over a plate of cookies. On the house, you three look like you need sugar. After Chloe demolished 2 cookies and excused herself to go look at the drawings on the wall, Ethan leaned back in his chair and exhaled. That went better than I expected. She's resilient. She's also 6. She shouldn't have to be resilient about her father lying to her. No. But she is, and she's handling it better than most adults would. Victoria picked at a cookie. What happens now? I don't know. Keep talking. Keep being honest. Try not to screw up more than necessary. He looked at her. What about you? Are you going back to Chicago? I have to, at least for now. The company is in the middle of a massive restructuring and people are panicking. But I don't want to disappear again. I want to find a way to be present there and here. I don't know if that's possible, but I want to try. Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. Then we'll figure it out, together. Chloe came back and climbed into her father's lap, antlers now completely sideways. Can Victoria come over for dinner tonight? If she wants to. Chloe looked at Victoria hopefully. Will you? Yeah, I'd like that. They spent the rest of the afternoon in the coffee shop, watching people come and go, listening to Chloe chatter about school and her friends. Normal things, simple things, the kind of moments Victoria had been chasing when she first ran away. But this time, she wasn't pretending to be someone else. She was just herself, messy and imperfect and honest. And somehow, that was enough. Dinner at Ethan's apartment was chaotic. Chloe insisted on helping cook, which resulted in flour on every surface and sauce on the ceiling. They made pizza from scratch because Chloe had seen it on a cooking show and decided it looked easy. It wasn't easy, but it was fun in a way Victoria's perfectly catered dinners had never been. They argued about toppings, burned the first attempt, and ended up ordering from the place down the street when the second pizza came out looking like modern art. While they ate slightly soggy delivery pizza on the couch, Chloe asked Victoria about her company. What do you make? Software. Programs that help businesses organize information and work more efficiently. That sounds boring, Victoria laughed. It kind of is, but it's also useful, and it helps people do their jobs better. Do you like it? I'm starting to. I didn't for a while, but I'm changing how we do things so it feels more meaningful. What does meaningful mean? It means doing something that matters, not just making money, but actually helping people. Chloe considered this while picking pepperoni off her pizza. Like how Diane makes coffee that makes people happy? Exactly like that. After dinner, Chloe insisted they watch a Christmas movie. She fell asleep halfway through, curled against Victoria's side like it was the most natural thing in the world. Ethan carefully picked her up and carried her to bed. When he came back, he sat down next to Victoria, and they finished the movie in comfortable silence. "She's going to be okay," Victoria said quietly. "Yeah, she is." Ethan turned to look at her. "What about us? Are we going to be okay?" "I don't know. I hope so. That's honest, at least. It's all I've got right now." He kissed her, soft and careful, like they were both made of glass. When they pulled apart, Victoria rested her forehead against his. "I have to go back to Chicago tomorrow." "I know. But I'll come back. Every weekend if I can. I want to make this work." "It's going to be hard. Long distance, 2 companies, a kid who's still processing everything." "I know." Victoria pulled back to look at him. "But hard doesn't mean impossible." "No, it doesn't." She left around 11, driving back to her hotel through empty streets. The weekend had been emotionally exhausting, but for the first time in weeks, she felt something like hope. The next morning, she drove back to Chicago, back to her company and the chaos she'd created, back to the life she was trying to reshape into something sustainable. Sarah met her at the door to her office with a stack of files. "We need to talk about Q4 projections and the investor lawsuits, and the fact that 3 more board members are threatening to resign." "Good morning to you too." "Sorry, good morning. You look different." "Different how?" Sarah tilted her head, studying her. "Less stressed? Which is weird considering everything falling apart." "Maybe I'm just getting better at not caring what falls apart." "That's either really healthy or really concerning." Victoria smiled. "Probably both." The next 3 weeks were brutal. Victoria worked 18-hour days trying to stabilize the company while implementing the changes she'd promised. Half her executive team fought her at every turn. Investors demanded meetings to discuss her erratic behavior. The press had a field day speculating about her mental health and the company's future. But she also started seeing progress. Employee satisfaction scores went up. Turnover decreased. The products they shipped were better quality because people weren't being pushed to impossible deadlines. It was slow, incremental change, but it was real. Every weekend she drove to Millbrook. She had dinner with Ethan and Chloe, helped with homework, watched movies on the lumpy couch. Sometimes Chloe was warm and affectionate. Sometimes she was distant and wary. Victoria learned to let her have both without taking it personally. "She's testing you," Ethan said one night after Chloe had gone to bed. "Seeing if you'll stick around when things are hard." "I know, I don't blame her. I'm testing you too, just more subtly." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "And how am I doing?" "Better than expected. You haven't run away yet." "The weekends are the easy part. It's the rest of the week that's killing me." "Why? I thought you loved your job." "I love building things. I hate the politics and the constant fighting." She leaned against him. "I'm starting to wonder if I can actually do this. Change a whole corporate culture while maintaining profitability, while also trying to have a personal life. It feels impossible." "So quit." Victoria sat up. "What?" "Quit, sell the company, walk away. You don't actually need the money." "It's not about money. It's about proving I can build something meaningful." "To who? The investors who are suing you? The board members who think you're crazy?" Ethan turned to face her. "I'm not saying you should quit. I'm saying you have options. You don't have to sacrifice everything for a company that doesn't appreciate you," says the man who's been running a billion-dollar investment firm while pretending to be a maintenance worker. "Exactly," says the man who knows what it's like to lose yourself in trying to do everything perfectly. His voice was quiet but firm. "I don't want that for you. I don't want you to look up in 5 years and realize you sacrificed the real stuff for the impressive stuff." Victoria didn't have an answer for that. That night she lay awake in Ethan's spare room. They weren't ready to navigate sleeping arrangements with Chloe still processing everything, and thought about what he'd said, about options and sacrifices and what actually mattered. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Emergency. Call me." Victoria called. "What's wrong?" "The CFO quit. Just sent in his resignation effective immediately. He's taking the VP of operations with him." "Okay. Okay?" "Victoria, that's 2 of your top executives walking out. The board is going to lose it." "Let them. We'll replace them with people who actually believe in what we're doing. You're not worried? Honestly? No. I'm tired of fighting people who don't want to be here. Victoria looked out the window at the quiet street. We'll figure it out. After she hung up, she realized she'd meant it. The old Victoria would have panicked, worked all night to fix the crisis, sacrificed whatever necessary to maintain control. But this version, the one who'd spent 6 weeks making coffee and falling in love with a single father and his daughter, couldn't bring herself to care that much. The company would survive or it wouldn't. Either way, she'd be okay. The next morning at breakfast, Chloe asked her a question that stopped Victoria mid-bite. Are you going to marry my daddy? Ethan nearly spit out his coffee. Chloe! What? I'm just asking. Victoria set down her fork carefully. We haven't talked about that. But do you want to? I don't know. We're still figuring out if we work as a couple first. Chloe nodded seriously. Emma's parents got divorced because they fought all the time. Do you and Daddy fight? Sometimes, about small things, but we talk about it. That's good. Communication is important. She said it like she was quoting a teacher or TV show. If you did get married, would you live here or would we live where you live? Chloe, that's enough interrogation for one breakfast, Ethan said gently. I'm not interrogating, I'm planning. She looked at Victoria. I don't want you to leave forever, but I also don't want to leave Millbrook. My friends are here. Victoria felt the weight of a 6-year-old's needs pressing against her own uncertainty. I don't want to leave forever either, and I wouldn't ask you to leave Millbrook if you don't want to. So you'd move here? Maybe, or maybe we'd figure out something in between. There's no rule that says people have to live in the same place all the time. Chloe looked skeptical, but didn't push further. After breakfast, Ethan walked Victoria to her car. Sorry about the third degree. Don't be, she's asking important questions. Victoria leaned against her car. Questions I don't have answers to yet. We don't have to figure everything out today. I know, but I also know we can't keep doing this indefinitely. The back and forth. Eventually, we'll need to make actual decisions. Yeah. Ethan kissed her forehead. But not today. Today you go back to Chicago and deal with your executive crisis. I'll stay here and convince my daughter that you're not going to disappear. I'm not disappearing. I know. But she needs to learn that through experience, not just words. Victoria drove back to Chicago thinking about Chloe's questions, about marriage and living situations, and the logistics of building a life with someone when both of you had massive responsibilities pulling you in different directions. She'd been so focused on the emotional honesty part, admitting feelings, being vulnerable, showing up, that she hadn't thought through the practical realities. How do two people with billion-dollar companies and completely different lives actually build something sustainable? Maybe they didn't. Maybe this whole thing was a beautiful disaster waiting to implode. Or maybe, she thought, as she pulled into her parking garage, maybe they just took it one day at a time and stopped trying to control the outcome. That sounded terrifying. It also sounded like the only honest option. The call came on a Thursday in late January, 3 months after Victoria had walked back into her real life. She was in the middle of a product review meeting when Sarah knocked on the conference room door with an apologetic look. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Ethan's online too. He says it's urgent. Victoria's stomach dropped. Ethan never called during work hours. They had an unspoken agreement. Weekdays belonged to their respective companies, weekends to each other. She excused herself and took the call in her office. What's wrong? Chloe's in the hospital. His voice was tight with barely controlled panic. She fell at school, hit her head. They think she has a concussion, but they're running tests to make sure there's no bleeding. I'm on my way. Victoria, you don't have to. I'm on my way. She hung up, grabbed her coat, and told Sarah to cancel everything for the next 2 days. Then she was in her car breaking every speed limit between Chicago and Millbrook. The drive took 90 minutes that felt like 90 years. Victoria's mind went to every worst-case scenario, every terrible possibility. She'd lost her grandmother to a fall. She knew how quickly things could go wrong. She also realized, with startling clarity, that Chloe had become as important to her as anyone she'd ever known. This little girl who tested her and questioned her and slowly, reluctantly let her in. Victoria would burn her entire company to the ground if it meant getting to the hospital faster. That thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt right. She found Ethan in the emergency room waiting area, looking like he'd aged 10 years. He stood when he saw her. Any news? Victoria asked. CT scan came back clear. No bleeding. Doctor says she'll be okay, but she needs to rest for a few days. They're keeping her overnight for observation. He ran a hand through his hair. She was on the monkey bars, just slipped. It happened so fast. Victoria pulled him into a hug. He held on like she was the only thing keeping him upright. She's okay, Victoria said firmly. She's going to be okay. I know. His voice cracked. I can't lose her. She's everything. You're not going to lose her. She's tough, like her dad. They sat together in the uncomfortable waiting room chairs until a nurse came out and said they could see her. Chloe was in a bed that looked too big for her small frame, connected to monitors that beeped softly. She had a bandage on her forehead and looked pale, but her eyes lit up when she saw them. Daddy, Victoria came. Of course I came, Victoria said, taking the chair next to her bed, while Ethan sat on the other side. How are you feeling? My head hurts, and I'm tired. The doctor said I have to stay here tonight. Just to be safe, you'll be home tomorrow. Chloe looked between them. Are you going to stay? Both of you? Wild horses couldn't drag us away, Ethan said. They stayed. Ethan slept in the chair next to Chloe's bed, while Victoria took the one by the window. Neither slept much. Every time Chloe stirred or the monitors changed rhythm, they both snapped to attention. Around 3 a.m, Chloe woke up crying. Not from pain, but from fear. I had a bad dream. Mom was in it. Ethan was at her side immediately. It's okay, sweetheart. It was just a dream. She was telling me to be careful on the monkey bars, but I didn't listen, and I fell. Chloe's voice was small and scared. Do you think she's mad at me? Victoria watched Ethan's face crumple, then carefully rebuild itself into something Chloe could lean on. Your mom loved you more than anything in the world. She's not mad. She could never be mad at you. He smoothed her hair back gently. Accidents happen. That's why they're called accidents. I miss her, even though I don't remember her. I know, baby. I miss her too. Chloe looked at Victoria. Is it weird that I want you to be my mom even though I had a different mom? The question hung in the air like something fragile and precious. Victoria felt her throat close up. No, she managed. It's not weird at all. Good. Because I decided I want you to stay. For real. Not just visiting on weekends. Ethan met Victoria's eyes over Chloe's head. They'd been avoiding this conversation for months, dancing around the logistics and the complications. But here it was, delivered by a 6-year-old with a concussion who saw things more clearly than either of them. Let's talk about that when you're feeling better, Ethan said gently. Right now, you need to rest. But you'll think about it, both of you? Yeah, Victoria said. We'll think about it. Chloe fell back asleep, holding both their hands. The next morning, they brought her home. Diane showed up with soup and cookies. Kelly, the babysitter, brought coloring books and puzzles. Even Ray, the landlord, stopped by with a stuffed animal he claimed he'd found in storage but that still had the tags on it. Millbrook takes care of its own, Diane said, setting up the soup in Ethan's kitchen while Victoria helped Chloe get settled on the couch. Even the ones who aren't actually from here. That night, after Chloe had finally fallen into a deep sleep and the visitors had gone home, Victoria and Ethan sat at his kitchen table with coffee. Neither of them was drinking. We need to talk, Ethan said. I know. This isn't sustainable, the back and forth. You running your company during the week, driving here on weekends. Me trying to manage Mercer Global remotely while pretending I'm just a maintenance guy. Something has to give. Victoria had been thinking the same thing. What do you want to do? I want to stop hiding, all of it. He looked tired but determined. I want to move Chloe to a better neighborhood, get her into a good school, stop pretending we're something we're not. She deserves stability. Agreed. I also want you, in our lives, permanently. But I don't know how to make that work when you're in Chicago and we're here. Victoria took a breath. What if I wasn't in Chicago? What do you mean? I've been thinking about this for weeks. The company doesn't actually need me there every day. We have good people. I was just too controlling to let them do their jobs. She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. I could relocate, set up a satellite office, work remotely most of the time, and fly in for important meetings. You'd do that? I'd try. If you're willing to stop pretending too, stop hiding your business,
Be honest with Chloe about what you do and who you are.
Ethan was quiet for a long moment. That scares me. The attention, the security concerns, the people who'll come out of nowhere wanting something. I know. It scares me too, but hiding is just another kind of prison. Victoria reached across the table and took his hand. I spent 6 weeks in Millbrook pretending to be someone else, and the best parts were when I was just being myself with you and Chloe. I don't want to hide anymore. What about your company, the restructuring? It's working, slowly. People are adjusting, and the ones who can't adjust are leaving, which honestly makes everything easier. She smiled slightly. Turns out when you stop trying to please everyone, you end up pleasing the people who actually matter. That sounds dangerously close to wisdom. Don't tell anyone, I have a reputation to maintain. He laughed, and some of the tension broke. So what are we actually proposing here? You move to Millbrook, we move to Chicago, some complicated arrangement in between? I don't know yet, but I think we figure it out together instead of separately. Victoria squeezed his hand. I love you, I'm terrified of screwing this up, but I love you, and I love Chloe, and I want to try to build something real. Even though it's messy and complicated? Especially because it's messy and complicated. Perfect isn't real. I'm done chasing perfect. Ethan stood up, pulled her to her feet, and kissed her. Not the careful kisses they'd been trading for months, but something deeper, a promise instead of a question. Okay, he said when they finally broke apart. Let's do this. For real. The next few weeks were chaos, but the productive kind. Victoria hired a COO for Hale Technologies, someone she actually trusted to run day-to-day operations. She set up a home office in a rental house outside Millbrook, close enough to visit Ethan and Chloe, but far enough to have her own space. She started flying to Chicago twice a month instead of living there. Ethan moved out of the small apartment and into a house with actual bedrooms and a yard. He told Chloe the truth about Mercer Global, about what he actually did for work. She took it better than expected, mostly because she was more interested in having her own room than in understanding investment portfolios. So we're rich, she asked. Yeah, kiddo, we're rich. Cool, can I get a dog? They got her a dog, a rescue mutt named Pancake, who had 3 legs and loved everyone indiscriminately. Victoria spent more time with Diane at the coffee shop, not as an employee but as a regular. They became actual friends, the kind who had coffee and talked about real things. You look happier, Diane observed one morning. I am happier. Even with all the complications? Because of the complications. Turns out I was bored being perfect. Being messy is way more interesting. Diane raised her coffee mug in a salute. Welcome to being human. It's terrible and wonderful. That's the most accurate description I've ever heard. But it wasn't all smooth. Victoria's board was furious about her reduced presence. 2 major investors pulled out completely. The stock dropped another 12% before stabilizing. There were articles speculating about her competence, her priorities, her mental health. She learned to ignore most of it. The part she couldn't ignore, she addressed head on. She did an interview with a business magazine where she talked honestly about burnout, about the pressure to be constantly available, about choosing life over optics. The article went viral. Half the tech world called her brave. The other half called her a sellout. She stopped reading the comments. Ethan had his own challenges. Moving Mercer Global's operations to be more transparent meant dealing with old guard investors who liked the mystery. Some of them left. New ones came in. The business shifted, evolved, became something different, but not necessarily worse. I feel like I can breathe, he told Victoria one night. Like I've been holding my breath for 4 years and finally remembered how to exhale. I know exactly what you mean. They had their first real fight in March. Victoria had promised to be at Chloe's school science fair, but got stuck in an emergency board meeting in Chicago. She missed it completely. Chloe was devastated. Ethan was furious. You promised, he said on the phone. I know. I'm sorry. The meeting ran long, and there's always going to be a meeting that runs long. There's always going to be an emergency. You have to choose what matters. That's not fair. You know how hard I'm trying. I do know, but trying doesn't mean much to a 6-year-old who waited for you to show up. They didn't talk for 2 days. Victoria spent that time wondering if she'd been fooling herself, thinking she could balance everything. Maybe you couldn't have a billion-dollar company and a family. Maybe something always had to break. On the 3rd day, she drove to Millbrook unannounced. Chloe answered the door, still clearly hurt. I'm sorry, Victoria said. I messed up. I promised I'd be there and I wasn't, and that was wrong. You missed my volcano. It was the best one in the whole class. I know, I can't get that time back, but I brought you something. She pulled out her phone and showed Chloe a calendar. See all these dates marked in green? Those are Chloe days. No meetings scheduled, no board calls, just time for you. I can't promise I'll never miss another event because sometimes life happens, but I promise I'll try harder. Chloe studied the calendar, then looked up at Victoria. What if there's a really important work thing on a Chloe day? Then we decide together if it's important enough to move the Chloe day. But you get a vote. Really? Really? Chloe thought about this, then nodded. Okay, I forgive you, but next time you miss my science fair, you have to help me build an even bigger volcano. Deal. Ethan had been watching from the hallway. After Chloe ran off to play with Pancake, he pulled Victoria into a hug. Thank you. I really am sorry. I know, and I'm sorry for being harsh on the phone. I was just scared. Of what? Of turning into my parents. They chose work over me every single time. I swore I'd never do that to Chloe, and then I fell in love with someone who has the same kind of demanding career. He pulled back to look at her. I need to know you'll choose us when it matters. I will. I am. Victoria took his face in her hands. But you need to trust that I'm learning how to do that. I'm going to mess up sometimes. We both will. That's part of being human. I hate being human. Yeah, me too. They worked on it, both of them, learning to communicate better, to set boundaries, to choose each other even when it was inconvenient. It wasn't always pretty. They had more fights, more missed connections, more moments of frustration. But they also had more real moments than Victoria had experienced in her entire adult life. Lazy Sunday mornings with Pancake sprawled across them, helping Chloe with homework at the kitchen table. Quiet evenings after Chloe went to bed, just talking about nothing important. Normal things, real things. In June, Victoria's company stabilized. The stock recovered most of its losses. The new structure was working. People were happier, more productive, more engaged. She'd lost some of the old guard investors, but gained new ones who actually cared about sustainable growth over quick profits. She gave a keynote speech at a tech conference where she talked about redefining success, about how wealth and power meant nothing if you were miserable, about choosing authenticity over appearances. The speech got a standing ovation, which was ironic considering half the audience probably thought she was crazy for walking away from the traditional path to success. Ethan started bringing Chloe to some of his business events. Not the high-stakes negotiations, but the charity fundraisers and networking dinners. She charmed everyone with her honest questions and complete lack of filter. My daddy used to pretend to be poor, but he was secretly rich the whole time, she told one very confused hedge fund manager. It was complicated. They became a known entity in both Millbrook and their respective business worlds. The CEO and the investor who'd hidden in a small town and found each other. People wrote articles about them, speculated about their relationship, analyzed their business decisions. They learned to ignore most of it. On a Saturday in late summer, Ethan asked Chloe if she wanted to go somewhere special. They drove to a park on the edge of town where there was a frozen fountain Victoria remembered from months ago. It wasn't frozen now. Water sparkled in the afternoon sun. "This is where I told your dad I was done pretending," Victoria said to Chloe as they sat on the bench together. "And where I told Victoria the same thing," Ethan added. Chloe looked between them. "Why are we here?" Ethan knelt down in front of Victoria and pulled out a small box. "Because this is where we started being honest, and I wanted to keep being honest." Victoria's heart stopped. "Victoria Hale, you drove me crazy for months. You showed up in my life pretending to be someone else, wormed your way into my daughter's heart, and made me remember what it felt like to want something other than safety." He opened the box to reveal a simple ring. "You're messy and complicated, and sometimes you miss science fairs. But you're also brave and honest, and you love us even when we're difficult. Will you marry me?" Victoria looked at him, then at Chloe, who was practically vibrating with excitement. "Yes," she said. "Absolutely yes." Ethan slid the ring on her finger, and Chloe launched herself at both of them, wrapping them in a fierce hug. "Does this mean you're officially my mom now?" "If you want me to be." "I do. Can I be in the wedding?" "You can plan the wedding if you want." "Really?" "Within reason," Ethan said quickly. They sat on that bench for a long time, the three of them, watching the fountain and planning impossible things. Chloe wanted a wedding with 1,000 balloons and a cake as tall as a house. Ethan wanted something small and quiet. Victoria just wanted to stop running. "What if we did both?" she suggested. "Small ceremony for us, big party for everyone else." "That's actually a good compromise," Ethan said. "Don't sound so surprised. I'm capable of good ideas." Occasionally. She kissed him while Chloe made exaggerated gagging sounds. The wedding happened in October, a year after Victoria had first disappeared from her old life. They got married at the Millbrook courthouse with just Diane and Mitchell as witnesses. Chloe wore a purple dress and carried Pancake, who wore a bow tie and behaved surprisingly well. The ceremony took 7 minutes. The judge asked if they promised to be honest with each other, to choose each other even when it was hard, to build something real instead of something perfect. They both said yes. The party happened a week later in Chicago. 200 guests, most of whom Victoria barely knew anymore. Board members and investors and society people who came because it was the event of the season. Victoria wore a designer dress and smiled for cameras and played the role everyone expected. But halfway through the reception, she found Ethan on the balcony. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just needed a break from being Victoria Hale, CEO." "You are Victoria Hale, CEO." "I know, but I'm also just Victoria. Took me 30 years to figure out those could be the same person." He pulled her close. And I like the just Victoria version better. Even though she comes with a complicated family and a 3-legged dog, especially because of that. Inside, someone was giving a toast. Something about power couples and business empires and changing the world. All the things people said at weddings like these. Victoria tuned it out. She had everything she actually wanted right here. 6 months later, Hale Technologies merged with a smaller competitor in a deal Victoria structured to prioritize employee welfare over shareholder value. The board nearly revolted. She let them. The merger went through anyway, creating something more sustainable than what either company had been separately. Ethan transitioned most of Mercer Global's management to a team he actually trusted and started spending more time on philanthropic work. Investments that mattered instead of just multiplying money. Chloe turned 7 and asked for a hermit crab for her birthday. They got her 2, which she named Business and Casual. She thought it was hilarious. Victoria never went back to working 18-hour days. She learned to delegate, to trust other people, to accept that good enough was actually good enough. Her company didn't dominate headlines the way it used to, but it was healthier, more stable, more aligned with what she actually believed. She kept the coffee shop job. One Saturday a month, she worked at Ember and Brew. Not because she needed the money or the nostalgia, but because Diane had been right. Sometimes people needed to feel useful in simple ways. On a cold morning in February, almost 2 years after she'd first run away, Victoria stood behind the counter making lattes for people she'd come to know. Frank the electrician with his thermos, the woman with the purple coat, now remarried and happy, new regulars who had no idea she was a CEO. Diane watched her work and smiled. "You've gotten better at the leaf pattern. Practice makes acceptable. Not perfect? Perfect's overrated." Chloe came in after school with Ethan, both of them covered in snow. She ran up to the counter and announced to everyone present that she'd gotten a gold star on her spelling test. "That's amazing, sweetheart," Victoria said, wiping down the espresso machine. "Can I have hot chocolate? The special kind?" "You can have whatever you want." While Victoria made Chloe's special hot chocolate, the recipe she'd learned from Diane and tweaked to add just a hint of caramel, she caught Ethan watching her with that look he got sometimes. The one that said he still couldn't believe this was real. She couldn't either, not all the time. But that was the thing about real life. It didn't feel real. It felt messy and complicated and uncertain. It felt like making coffee on a Saturday when you could be doing 1,000 other things. It felt like fighting with your husband about whose turn it was to walk the dog. It felt like helping a 7-year-old with homework that made no sense. It felt human. Victoria had spent most of her life chasing perfect. The perfect company, the perfect success, the perfect image. She'd built an empire and lost herself in the process. And then she'd run away trying to find something authentic in the simplest version of life she could construct. But authenticity wasn't in the running away or the hiding or the pretending. It was in the choosing. Choosing to be honest even when it was uncomfortable. Choosing people over profit. Choosing messy and real over polished and empty. She'd learned that you couldn't escape yourself by changing your name or your job or your zip code. You had to actually do the work of figuring out who you were and what you wanted. And then you had to have the courage to build that life, even when it didn't look like what everyone expected. Ethan had learned similar lessons. He'd spent years hiding his wealth and his business to protect Chloe from the attention and expectations. But hiding had its own costs. It meant living in fear, maintaining exhausting lies, never fully being himself. Together, they'd figured out something better. Not perfect. Nothing was ever perfect. But real. A life built on honesty and choice, and accepting that you could be complicated and still be loved. Chloe finished her hot chocolate and asked if she could go draw on the chalkboard. Diane said yes and handed her a box of colored chalk. "She's a good kid," Diane said, watching Chloe draw what appeared to be a three-legged dog on a spaceship. "Yeah, she is. You two did okay, considering you started with lies and disaster. We got lucky."
Luck helps, but you also put in the work. Diane refilled the coffee beans. Most people run away from hard things. You ran toward them. That counts for something. After her shift, Victoria drove home with Ethan and Chloe. Home was a house just outside Millbrook, big enough for all of them, but not ostentatious. A place where Chloe could have friends over, and Pancake could run in the yard, and Victoria could work in her office overlooking the trees. A place that felt right instead of impressive. That night, after Chloe was asleep and Pancake was snoring on the couch, Victoria and Ethan sat on their back porch watching the stars. "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan asked, "walking away from your old life, everything you built?" Victoria thought about it honestly. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of just focusing on one thing. Work was easier when it was the only thing. But I don't miss being lonely. I don't miss the emptiness. I don't miss looking around and realizing nobody actually knew me." She leaned against him. "I'd rather have this. The messy, complicated, sometimes frustrating reality of actually being present in my life. Even when I forget to take out the trash? Even then, though you really need to work on that." He laughed and kissed her temple. "What about you? Any regrets?"
"I regret that it took me so long to figure out I could just be honest, that I spent years hiding behind different versions of myself, instead of just showing up as I was." She looked up at the stars. "But I don't regret any of it now. The running, the hiding, the lies, they all led here. To you, to Chloe, to Pancake and his weird snoring. Our origin story is insane. The best ones usually are. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd found each other through deception and built something real through honesty. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't perfect. It was better than both of those things. It was true." Inside, Chloe called out in her sleep. Not a nightmare, just a small sound. Victoria started to get up, but Ethan put a hand on her arm. "I'll check on her. You've got that early meeting tomorrow." "We could both check." "We could." They went inside together, checked on their daughter, who was sprawled across her bed with one arm around a stuffed elephant, then went to their own room. Victoria fell asleep thinking about how strange life was. How you could run away from everything and end up finding exactly what you needed. How the worst lies could lead to the best truths. How being lost was sometimes the only way to figure out where you actually belonged. She'd been Victoria Hale, CEO and billionaire, isolated at the top. She'd been Tori the barista, hiding from responsibility. Now she was just Victoria. Wife, mother, businesswoman, friend. Messy and complicated and imperfect and real. And finally, after 32 years, that was enough. Outside, snow began to fall again over Millbrook, covering the coffee shop where two people had first connected over lies, covering the park where they'd chosen honesty, covering the house where they'd built something neither of them had known they needed. The snow fell on the small town and the big city, on corporate headquarters and corner stores, on everyone pretending and everyone trying to be real. And in a house at the edge of Millbrook, 3 people slept, a family built from deception and rebuilt with truth. Imperfect and impossible and entirely, completely theirs.